Well, we got a minute. I'm gonna buy that truck I've been wanting.
Wait, don't you need like weeks to shop for a car?
I don't. Carvana makes it super convenient to find exactly what I want.
Hold up. You're buying a car on your phone? Isn't that more of a laptop thing?
You can shop wherever you want.
I like to do my research, read reviews, compare models. Plus, Carvana has thousands of options. How'd you decide on that truck?
Because I like it.
Oh, that is a great reason.
Go to Carvana.com to sell your car the convenient way.
Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your own online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to the other leading commerce platforms. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo. Shopify.com/promo.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, it's questions day, and the big question is, I can see where you are, but where are you?
I'm currently in Stuttgart Airport after, I think it was 4, I can't even count myself now, 3 or 4 days in Berlin, which is an incredible city, culminating with going to watch the final last night. And because flights are crazy prices, I'm going the scenic route back to Brighton. And I've just remembered that I've got graduation on Tuesday. So I need to get from Brighton to Liverpool as well.
Well, you might as well go from Brighton to Liverpool via Stuttgart, Kieran. It's the same roundabout way. Stuttgart is quite some way from Berlin, Kieran, but we haven't got time really to discuss how you ended up in Stuttgart, because your plane could be called at any moment. So let's start the pod, Kieran. I could start with another question. This is why it took 45 minutes to realise that Harry Kane shouldn't be playing for England, but this is not a football pod, Kieran. So what can you do?
Very wise.
I would ask you if you had a nice time, Kieran, but quite clearly you probably had the same sort of time as I had, which involved ripping wall charts off the furniture and glaring at the cat. Mark Collins has our first question, Kieran. It's a simple one, but it's an interesting one. Mark Collins says, with players seemingly signing longer and longer contracts, do they ever include inflation-linked pay increases?
Well, I have seen quite a few contracts, and they will often involve step-ups in years 2, 3 and 4. Now, those step-ups will be set in advance, so therefore they wouldn't be related to the consumer price index or the retail price index, which isn't a huge issue as far as currently living in the UK is concerned. But if you were living in Peru or Turkey or some of the countries which have suffered significant inflation, what the player might do, or what the agent might negotiate, is for the player's contract to be paid in the equivalent of dollars. So therefore, if there's been a significant diminishment of purchasing power due to the currency falling, you're still getting the dollar equivalent. So as with all contracts, it's very much a case of looking at the small print and getting your representative to make it as future-proof as possible, especially if it's a 4 or 5 year contract. Circumstances can change. So there is the opportunity to earn more, but that doesn't necessarily coincide with a formal inflation adjustment.
Second question, Kieran. Why are people talking about Graham Potter as the New England manager? He's even more cautious than the one we've currently got. But it's not a football pod, Kieran, so I'll ask the question that Billy Wakefield has asked us. I presume his name is Billy Wakefield, which is a great name. It could be Billy from Wakefield, but I hope it's Billy Wakefield, because that's a proper 60s character actor name, isn't it? Billy Wakefield, third in the billing under Dirk Bogarde and Sid James. Billy Wakefield says, the season before last, Southampton, Leeds and my club Leicester City were relegated. They then undertook or were forced into different transfer strategies, with Leicester and Southampton selling off their higher quality assets to Premier League teams, whereas Leeds loaned out the majority of their better players. The Leeds fans I work with seem to think that despite the lack of sales, the loans actually helped their accounts, with the loans reducing the amortisation cost. So is selling players outright or is loaning players better in respect of amortisation FFP?
I think this is a classic. It depends as far as the answer is concerned. And the reason why I say that is if you take a look at Leeds' position, I think they still sold one or two players. They had signed, Leeds have spent a fortune on signing players in year 2 and 3 of their time in the Premier League. And also, as far as their wage bill was concerned, they were very much committed towards sort of the higher end of the non-six. So finding alternative places for those players in both the UK and Europe for players that have just been relegated was proven to be quite difficult. So therefore they went down the loan route. However, if you do loan a player out, you still have to go and put through the amortisation. What you try to do is to offset the loan fee that you'll receive, which will often be performance related, against the amortisation charge. And you're trying all the time to persuade the club to whom you're lending the player to pick up a significant proportion of the wage bill. But it's not always the case. I mean, I remember when Wayne Bridge was loaned to Brighton from Manchester City, because they had about 12 left backs at the time. I think we ended up paying 10% of his wages. So it is very much a case of horses for courses. And if we take a look at what had happened with Leicester, they had Harvey Barnes and James Maddison, both of whom were very attractive propositions as far as other clubs were concerned. Leeds still did have some sales. I think that they had committed themselves so much, not just to buying players, but buying all of these players on instalments. When Leeds were relegated, they had £190 million worth of debt due to other clubs, which they can cope with. You know, it is Leeds United; they're a big club, but all the same, it was, you know, from a cash flow point of view, they're just trying to balance the books as best as possible.
Wayne Bridge, I'd completely forgotten about Wayne Bridge. Isn't it strange how the mind works? His wife, I remember his wife doing Strictly, but Wayne Bridge played for England, didn't he? I'm having trouble with my ears at the moment, Kieran, as you know, as an ongoing investigation into some hear loss. But that strikes me as a very quiet airport, Kieran, Frankfurt, except, are you sitting next to a fish tank?
It's very Germanic, I think, and functional in style with regard to the design. So that's why, yes, there's an awful lot of pipe work all around. Which
I see, right.
And it's Stuttgart.
I thought you were describing the fish tank as Germanic. I like the idea of a very efficient, well-organised fish tank. Although apparently the trains are up all over the place by a really disgruntled journalist in The Observer having their all-expenses-paid trip to Germany ruined by trains being half-hour late. Craig Farrell has our next question. Again, it's a short one, but it's an interesting one. How much does having an international cap inflate a player's transfer value? Or, you could say, in the case of Jude Bellingham, how much is playing for England in this tournament knocked off his price? Because I'm worried that the real Jude Bellingham is still tied up in a cellar somewhere, because the one that played for England, apart from scoring his goal and boasting a little bit, had a shocking tournament.
But this isn't a football show.
It's not. Now, let's not reflect the bitter disappointment of waiting to get into another final and then not playing. Let's keep that out. You're quite right, Kieran. You're absolutely. I'm all right. At least the game ended. I was at home. I was with my loved ones. You were in Berlin, surrounded by angry English people and UEFA officials.
Yeah, it was really strange, sort of walking out of the ground, because. And you'd expect nothing else from a football fan. Being truly graceless, there was no way I was going to watch the Spanish captain lift the trophy, along with the vast majority of England fans, which is quite right. And I put heart and soul into booing Marc Correa for 90 minutes as well. So I did feel slightly let down, but there was a sense of sort of general resignation. People couldn't even get angry. It was just sort of. We all got on the metro together and just sort of shrugged and go, well, that was back to square one. But we got the final. Better to get to the final than not get out of the group games. So, you've got to be positive. But on to Craig's question. With regards to international caps, it wouldn't necessarily impact upon the player's transfer value. But what we could have is, as part of the signing contract, is that it will be an add-on. So if a player gets 20 caps or 5 caps or 10 caps, whatever, or even a first cap, you quite often see that as an add-on, and you have to go and pay an extra £1 million or additional fees. And what we are seeing in respect of a lot of transfers these days, because there's been some very selective leaking to football journalists, is they'll say that the transfer fee is £30 million plus £10 million worth of add-ons, which are very achievable or which are almost impossible, and so on. So quite often as part of the add-on fee, you would have to go and pay. But with regards to, I think, the market value of a player, the only time what international caps tend to have a significant impact is if that player has a storming competition. So if we go back to Euro 96 and the Czech Republic got to the final and Podolski had a fantastic tournament. So, and the next minute, he was sort of let's face it, being an international football player, mug. But next minute he was at Manchester United and therefore paying the Manchester United tax and paying Manchester United, he's earning Manchester United wages, which was probably, a bit of a step up. Although I think he scored twice at Anfield in one match and he became legend for that as amongst Manchester United fans. So a lot would depend on the country. If you're getting 5 caps from San Marino, is that going to impact your transfer value as far as being a Champions League participant is concerned? Unlikely. But it can have an impact upon contractual obligations between the buying club and the selling club in terms of where you are at present.
Yeah, if it's any consolation, Kieran, the final whistle was still sounding as I switched to an old episode of Antiques Roadshow. I wasn't going to watch Spain lift the trophy. Why would you watch the other team lift the trophy, or indeed listen to a giggling Micah Richards explain what had just gone wrong when you'd watched it going wrong for 90 minutes? Now, Keith Parry that's the last time we'll mention it, I promise, producer guy. Keith Parry has a question, the answer to which I'm very interested to hear, because it's about your favourite club, Kieran. Keith Parry says, how long do you think it will be before the current Chelsea ownership see a return on their investment of approximately £4.5 billion to acquire the club, plus a net transfer spend of approximately £500 million? What do you think it will be, 10 years, 50 years, or whenever they decide to sell the club? And we've talked about returns on investment quite a lot in the past few weeks, Kieran. So when you invest that much money, you imagine it's going to take quite some time before you get it back. And I can't imagine the club being worth that much more even in 10 years' time, can it?
The only way it will be worth something more in 10 years' time will be, A, if we solve the problem of digitalisation. Chelsea have got a big international fan base who can't get to Stamford Bridge. Can we give them a Stamford Bridge experience on match day? And I've told you, I've been on panels with private equity and they think that they have the answer to that by opening up sort of virtual stadiums around the world. And that will be done on sort of a franchise basis. The other way that Chelsea's value could substantially increase, and I know the club will say, well, it was a mistake, is in respect of Super League. If you've got the ability to qualify for a tournament where you don't have to win matches. And the most recent time that Toad Bowley had discussed the issue, he said, well, we're not thinking of doing it yet. And it was very much was, you read between the lines, these owners still want such a competition. Even they're not that thick-skinned that they can't read the room in terms of the reaction from fans. And you've got to give Chelsea fans credit here, along with all of the other fans of the big 6 clubs. They universally rejected the proposal of Super League. But I think what you will start to see is owners starting to chip away and try to persuade them it's actually in their best interests, because if you allow the club to finish 12th in the Premier League and still qualify for Europe, and fans quite like the idea of that. So in terms of getting a return on investment, I think we would have to have a sea change. What we could see is Chelsea going down the same route as we've seen with the Glazers at Manchester United, giving 25% to Jim Ratcliffe and making $1 billion on an initial investment which cost them tens of millions. We've seen FSG at Liverpool buy the club for 300 million in 2009 and sell 10% of the club for 300 million in 2022. So I think you could see a partial disposal by Chelsea if the club starts to improve in terms of qualifying for Champions League and so on. There's still an awful lot of expense to take place there because it sticks out like a sore thumb. We've got Old Trafford, 76,000 capacity or thereabouts.
Yeah.
You've got all of the ones at 60,000, and then you drop down to Chelsea at just around about 40 in terms of matchday income. Now, whilst Chelsea prices are extortionate, and Chelsea fans, to give them credit, have tried to raise this issue, it is a one hand behind their back issue. And the only way to solve that is to build a new stadium.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your site will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at Bluehost.com.
Did I hear you're shopping for a car? Because I've been at it for ages. Ugh, such a time suck, right?
Not really. I bought it on Carvana. Super convenient.
Oh, then comes all the financing, research, am I right?
Well, you can, but I got pre-qualified for a Carvana auto loan in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, but then all the number crunching and terms, right?
Nope. I saw real numbers as I shopped, found my dream car, and got it in a couple of days.
Wait, like you already have it?
Yep.
Oh.
Go to Carvana.com to finance your car the convenient way.
When Todd Boehly and his people bought Chelsea, Kieran, knowing probably that they would have to rebuild Stamford Bridge or build a new stadium somewhere else, do you think they would have expected a return on their investment? Is that why they bought the club in the first place, to maybe get some money back in 20 years' time?
Oh yes, without doubt. They are not interested in sport. They are interested in making money. It just so happens that if you take a look at Boehly's portfolio of investments, it includes American sports franchises. And, he is alleged to be a bit naive in terms of his knowledge of football. You've got Thomas Tuchel's famous comments about Boehly suggesting, why not introduce a 4-4-3 formation? After all, you've got 11 players, which I hope is true. Boehly's PR are pushing back on that, but I know Tuchel was very bitter about the way he was sacked. So, we don't know whether that was just a throwaway line. So with regards to getting an investment, absolutely. Clear Lake Capital, who are the 60% owners of Chelsea, Boehly and the other investor have got the other 40%. They're not interested in football. They got, their job is to look after the wealth of the people who are putting money into the private equity funds, and they are cold, calculating, ruthless, and will take your hand off if it earns a bit more money for them. So there's nothing other than a financial return being sought by the owners.
Well, we all make football mistakes, Kieran. It's like our not our only Tory friend, but our Tory friend Ian Dale, who tweeted last night to ask why the Spanish players weren't singing their national anthem. Did they have no pride in their country? Which was slightly unfortunate. Even more unfortunate was it he tweeted just before Spain scored. So there you are. Christopher Dyer, last mentioned, promise. Christopher Dyer. Now, this is a really interesting question, Kieran. More so probably for fans of clubs in Italy, for example, where it's more common. But Christopher Dyer says, is there any evidence to suggest that ground sharing with teams from other sports is financially beneficial for football clubs, Hull City, for example? So I take that back, Kieran, because in Italy they share with other football clubs. But Christopher Dyer's comment is about sharing with rugby clubs, basically, which has happened to a couple of clubs. Reading, I believe, Groundsharing, didn't they, with London Irish for a while? So it's an interesting question.
Yes, we have seen quite a few rugby union players use the facilities of football clubs. And the benefit is that the football club as landlord can charge a rental fee. The benefit is that instead of the ground being open 25 days a year, it can now be open 40 to 50 in terms of generating money from merchandise sales. Even if you're selling the rugby kit in the mega store, you're going to be taking a 20% cut of the proceeds. You've got catering on match days, and that will be in the contract. So there are those benefits. If we take a look at the position in Italy, what tends to be the case there is that the stadiums are owned by the municipality. And because of the politest way I can describe it is the unique way of doing business in Italy. and that doesn't mean that having to bribe local officials who will otherwise be very, very slow in processing it. That's why we've got this backlog in terms of Italian stadia. I went to Roma Stadium earlier this year, and it was great in some ways, but you just realise just how far behind the times it was for a club with the stature of Roma. It was big, and that was about the only positive with regards to it. So there are issues. So you do have those revenue benefits, but you also have cost benefits, higher maintenance costs, higher electricity costs. You're going to, in terms of what's happening on a match day, is the stewarding going to be borne by the parent, i.e. the landlord? Is that borne by the rugby club? There are sort of complications here, but if you negotiate right, you can be a beneficiary as the landlord. If you're West Ham, you can benefit as the tenant spectacularly well, as we've discussed on many an occasion.
We've all been to Roma Stadium, Kieran. Well, I should qualify that. Some of us have driven past it. So you don't have to. You don't actually have to qualify for Europe to play there, Kieran. I suppose in terms of sharing with rugby clubs, in the north, if a football club is sharing with a rugby league club, Hull, for example, I imagine the chances are that the rugby league club's attendance is probably nearly as high as the football club. And rugby league seems to be in a financially better state than rugby union. It seems in the south, if you're sharing with a rugby club, far fewer people will be coming into the stadium, and you're still getting all those stadium costs. But B, with the state of rugby union finances, you've got no guarantee that rugby club will still be there at the end of the season.
Yeah, we've seen 3-4 rugby union clubs go into liquidation. And without wanting to turn this into the price of rugby, I've taken quite an in-depth look at the state of rugby union club finances. It's a professional sport being run by amateurs in an amateur way. It was my conclusion. And unlike football, I think the advantage that football has is that there is a long line of fools. We often talk about the bigger fool theory in selling anything. As long as you find somebody to take it off your hands, then you're happy. There's not that same long line of fools to take rugby clubs out of the hands of present owners who either go bust or lose interest. The same issues that we have in football. So that's why there's complications there. Rugby league has always lived within its means, because the concept of benefactor owner in terms of being a benevolent billionaire really doesn't exist in Castlefield or Wakefield. And that's not denigrating the people that do own the clubs. They're fine, fantastic local people, but it's just not part of the culture of the game.
Is there a place called Castlefield?
Castlefield, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not. It's a lovely place name. I'm going to get more tweets, aren't I, about my geography knowledge. Our third last question, Kieran, comes from Mark Last. Now, I'm not one to teach producer guy his job, but I would have made Mark Last question the last question, just for comedy purposes, Kieran. You'd think, and then you'd find somebody called Mark Pre-Penultimate, and you'd make him the third last question. But clearly, producer guys decided to make Mark last question the pre-penultimate question, and who am I to question producer guy? We all know, says Mark last, thanks to Kieran's patient explanations, and my patient listening, thank you, that a transfer fee is broken down for P&S rules by the length of the contract. But how does that relate to the actual payments that are made? I'm sure Brighton won't be collecting the Caicedo transfer fee in 8 instalments. So how does this not affect P&S more than the contract length?
Yep, it's a fair question, Mark.
Yeah.
Amortisation and cash flow are completely independent of one another. So therefore, the figures that you see going into the equations, as far as that was somebody just going past on a mini scooter, just giving you the flavour of Stuttgart Airport. So what you will see is amortisation is driven by contract length, and if you've got a contract extension, you've got adjustments for that. The cash flow issues will be decided between the two parties in terms of the buying club and the selling club. And Chelsea, for example, under Abramovich, what they tended to do was to buy players with a view to paying immediately, because Abramovich knew that if he says, it's a bit like anything, if you say, A, I'll pay cash, and B, I'll pay immediately, you might get a 5 or 10% discount off the asking price. Even though they would still be amortising the players over the length of the contract. So the two issues are very much independent of one another, and you do get this divergence, and I think it does cause quite a bit of confusion amongst fans, especially when they see that their club has a very significant outstanding balance due. I mean, Manchester United owe, I think, around about £350 million in outstanding instalments in respect of transfers for players they've already bought. And I think that's sort of a hidden issue. And what we're seeing as far as fans are concerned is that they don't see that as existing debt. But if you owe a lot of money on a credit card, then you can't go and buy something else on your credit card. And that's sort of business sort of 101 in terms of running your cash flow. So it's the cash flow issue, in my view, is a hidden iceberg as far as football is concerned. Because if you actually take a look at the total numbers amongst Premier League clubs, I think we're talking close to £2 billion in unpaid transfer fees. If something, it's not going to happen. If something happened that Sky had a cash flow problem and they couldn't pay the Premier League, well, those Premier League clubs wouldn't be able to go and pay the next instalments, and you could have this big ripple effect in the football industry. And that's also my concern with clubs like Barcelona, who have bought a lot of players on credit. And if they start missing instalments, then that has a knock-on effect. And we could have contagion in exactly the same way that we had in 2007, 2008 with the subprime problems that we had in the US.
Well, also, there's a sort of contagion in French football now, isn't there, with broadcasting issues, which we'll be discussing at some length in our news pod on Thursday. Rather distressing situation for a lot of French clubs. Our penultimate question, Kieran, comes from Josh Hall. And I pause between those two, Kieran, because for those of us with a South London accent, if you don't pause between Josh and Hall, it just becomes Josh Hall. So our next question comes from Josh Hall, and I'm really interested in the answer to this as well. Again, Kieran, all good questions this week. They're good questions every week. But Josh says, given that the European Super League is not going away and probably will happen one day, do you think that Dublin might get a franchise club? Living here for 5 years, I'm struck by the Premier League's massive following and the many Irish fans that travel to the UK to watch games every week. This seems right for a franchise. Passionate fans, a ready 52,000-seat stadium, and solid transport to other European cities. Good question, Kieran.
It is. I think we both remember Sam Haman trying to get Wimbledon to go to Dublin at one point, and that was poo-pooed. But if we move to a Super League which is independent of the individual football associations, so I think in order for this to work, what we would have to have is the Super League clubs would say, we're not going to play in the Premier League. Perhaps they might get an invite to the FA Cup. And I think certainly from sort of measuring the response on social media, there's certainly a weight of opinion to say, let's just say goodbye to Manchester United, Liverpool, Manchester City and the London clubs. Go off and play in your own competition. You could have a Premier League of Newcastle and Villa and Leeds and Leicester and Wolves and Palace, which would be a fantastically exciting competition. It would probably be more competitive in many ways. And I think there would still be a lot of appeal for it. So that's an option. And then what would you do in terms of Super League? The people who were funding it were American investment banks, along with private equity. Their preferred model is a franchise model. And if you take a look at what we have in MLS clubs can move into MLS if they pay what's referred to as an expansion fee. Now, that expansion fee could be $250, $400, $500 million. So if you get a group of wealthy investors in Dublin who approach Super League and say, look, you've got 12 clubs as founder members at present. We'd like to become number 13. Here's $400 or $500 million or whatever it's going to be. Then that would certainly start a conversation. You'd have to recruit players fairly quickly. That has been possible in MLS. We've seen with Miami. So it very much can be done. So I think it's one of those things which would be an interesting event. As far as the Aviva Stadium is concerned in Dublin, it's a really good stadium for football purposes. I've been to see internationals there. Transport links are good domestically. Transport links are good internationally from a flights point of view. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities there, but not necessarily just in Dublin, because if we take a look at the original Super League, it only involved clubs from 3 countries. So it wasn't European. It was Italy, Spain, and England. It only involved 6 cities, I think. So because so many clubs, we 3 clubs from London, 2 clubs from Manchester, and so on. So I think there's an opportunity to expand that franchise. I wouldn't be seen dead near any of those matches on a point of principle, and I suspect you'd be the same, and many fans who share our viewpoints. But there would be, I can assure you, there would be an international audience for it, and there would be a global audience for it. And I would imagine Dublin would like to share in that success.
You answered my question there, Kieran, because I was going to say, if you've got some billionaires in Hungary, for example, or Kazakhstan, maybe, who figure that they're not going to be seeing Champions League football anytime, why not buy themselves into the Super League? And as the Super League is all about money, you can imagine, following on from Rob's question, you can imagine a year or 2 after the Super League starts, you've got Super League 2, which is all franchise clubs from billionaires who want in.
Okay, you can do this.
I know. Carvana makes it so convenient to sell your car. It's just hard to let go. My car and I have been through so much together.
But look, you already have a great offer from Carvana. That was fast.
Well, I know my license plate and VIN by heart, and those questions were easy.
You're almost there. Now to just accept the offer and schedule a pickup or drop-off.
How'd you do it? How are you so strong in letting go of your car?
Well, I already made up my mind, and Carvana's so easy.
Yeah, true. And sold.
Go to Carvana.com to sell your car the convenient way.
Now, our last question, Kieran, could be an hour long. So I think we need to ration ourselves in case your flight is called at some stage during the afternoon. It's only more. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, Kieran. That's how much I love you. I've got up this early because you're stuck at an airport. Rob Sinclair as our last question. Let's see if we can answer it in 5 minutes, Kieran. But Rob Sinclair says, purely hypothetically, as a football fan, what are the first warning signs one should look for if the club is potentially in trouble, but people might not know about it? What are the initial indicators that Kieran would consider alarming? Are there any specific markers in the club's accounts, for example, that would raise red flags? Or is it a case that rumours will suddenly start swirling amongst agents, players, etc., who deal with the club on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think this is a cracker for Rob. In terms of red flags, issues I have with the accounts is that you're looking in a rear view mirror. They're normally 6 to 9 months old. So that's, if you're trying to pick up current issues, that could be a bit of a problem. I get a list of county court judgments every day. So I scour that. When I'm not, when I'm not looking at Company's House, that's another one of my little foibles. How I'm still married is beyond me. So I'll often pick up on those in respect of football clubs. What I also do is I have a list of companies which are owned by football club owners, and I link those to Companies House. So if there's signs of financial distress with the club owners, if you're running a widget factory and that's got problems, that means you can't pay the bills at the football club. And this is what happened at Bury, for example, with Stuart Day, with his ancillary businesses. So those are the types of things to look at. As far as the accounts themselves, are your wages bigger than revenue? That's quite common, actually, but it's certainly something I do look out for. But I actually focus on cash, and I look at the cash flow, and I look at something called operating cash flow, which is the cash that the football club generates on a day-to-day basis. And if you're running any business, if you're running a pub, if you're running a hotel, if you're running a manufacturer or even a retailer, if you can't generate cash from running the business on a day-to-day basis and ignore capital expenditure commitments, ignore investing in players and so on, then you've got a problem. And if you take a look at the Premier League in 22-23, for example, the three clubs with the worst operating cash flow were, I think, Leicester, who were probably about to get a charge from the Premier League, Everton, who have had a charge from the Premier League, and Nottingham Forest. So, there are these little things which you do pick up on, submitting the accounts late, those type of things. And then the rest is, as Rob suggests, just keeping your ear to the ground.
Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that'd be very kind of you. It'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceforfootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceforfootball.com, and you can go to the same website, priceforfootball.com, if you'd like to buy our book. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter, X, and you can find us on our YouTube channel. Hopefully, Kieran will be back in Liverpool, Brighton, Hanover by Thursday for our news pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to said Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell in difficult circumstances.
Yes. Thank you for all the kind words of support from everybody. Having worked out that I was across here in Germany, it's very much appreciated that there's been so much care and love sent. There's a variety of ways of supporting the show. Patreon is one. You can get the ad-free version of the show for just £3 a month. But there's another way to support the show, and that's to give us a review using your app. By all accounts, it doesn't matter what you say, according to Producer Guy. So that's a good thing from our point of view. You can say whatever you want. So you could even say you'd rather have the show presented by Donald Trump and Donald Duck. And it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to us.
Donald Duck is hard to understand at the best of times, Kieran. When your ears just been shut off, I mean, it'd be even more difficult. If you don't mind, Kieran, I'd like to end the show by asking our listeners if they're that way inclined to send prayers, and if they're not that way inclined, to send love to my old friend John Hunt, who's a big fan of this pod and the dearest, kindest person you'd ever meet. And if anyone needs love and prayers from around the world at the moment, it's John. So please, if you would do that for me, I'd be very grateful to you, and we'll see you on Thursday. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.
Welcome to another round of Boardroom or Miro Board. Today we talk retrospectives with Agile coach Maria. Let's go. First question. You spent 2 hours in a team retro, but the only input you've heard is Dave's. Boardroom or Miro Board?
Boardroom. In Miro, Dave can't hog the space because everyone can add thoughts anonymously, online at the same time.
Correct. Next, you need the team to act on feedback fast. So you turn all those retro notes into Jira tasks.
Miro all the way. And I can assign those tasks to teammates.
You're nailing this. Now, you see hundreds of sticky notes from the Retro. A real mess. But you organize them into 5 themes in just seconds.
Miro, I basically get back an entire hour when I use its AI tools for clustering.
And she's done it.
For a limited time, visit Miro.com/retro now for a free business plan trial to unlock advanced retro tools like private mode, voting, and two-way Jira syncing. That's Miro.com/retro now.